Hello and welcome to the Streets Will Never Forget podcast with me, Callum, known as Trail. We've also got with me Callum, known as Wall, and I've got with me Rob, known as Rob. So the Streets Will Never Forget podcast. Just didn't know what to say, so let's go with that.
He didn't even say hello.
Yeah, sorry. Do you want to say hello? Come on, Rob, speak up.
No, I thought we'd do it later. I was going to come in later.
Say hello at the end. So the Streets Will Never Forget podcast is a podcast we've decided to do basically around footballers that may be underrated, overrated, sort of your little-known football. I say little-known footballers that don't get as much attention as maybe they should.
Yeah, cult footballers.
Cult footballers. What we'll do is spend the next 10, 15 minutes chatting a bit of shit about them, giving our opinions. We've done more research into this player than I think I've ever done into any player before. So hopefully it'll be pretty good. Are you both ready to start?
Yeah, I think I'm ready. I've spent all my days researching, so I'm ready to fight my case.
Fantastic. Rob?
Yes, mate, I am more than ready to go.
Ready to go. Brilliant. So
I love the enthusiasm.
The player we have chosen for the first podcast, you can probably tell by the name, is the legend that is Rickie Lambert. Now, I'm going to start you both off with a little quiz about Rickie.
I like this.
To see what you know first. It's easy questions. I say it's easy. I'm hoping it is. If you've both done your research, it's easy. So this is question number one about Rickie Lambert. How old was he when he made his England debut?
Oh, I know this. I've got this.
Rob?
Got this pinned down, mate. 31, mate.
31. He was 31. That's good.
31, mate. Last minute winner, Scotland.
Actually, Rob, you've just answered one of the future questions.
Yeah, that's not question two.
It is. You've just given away one of the future questions, Rob. But that's okay.
Edit it, mate. Edit it.
Well, ask it again.
Second question: how many competitive goals did he score for Liverpool?
Oh, for Liverpool? Oh, I don't know this one. I've got his overall. I'm going to say 7.
Yeah, I've got his overall. I know his overall was 31, but in terms of Liverpool, I think was it maybe a season or two he had for Liverpool? Not really a huge amount, so I can't imagine. I'm going to guess 5.
Well, I've gone with the obviously I'm sure you know, I probably won't say the name of the website, but the website where I get most information from, and it says only 2. 2.
And it only lasted a season though, didn't it? Because he then moved on to West Brom and Coventry and Cardiff.
So third question: which club released him as a youth player?
What do you want to say for this one, mate?
I think I know this one. I believe it's Liverpool.
It's Liverpool. It is Liverpool. Well done. Question 4. I imagine you'll both know this one as well now. Who did he score his international goal against? His first one.
Moldova.
The old Scottish Isles, mate. Scotland.
Rob did say it earlier, Wall. I thought you heard him.
Yeah, no, I was having a joke. Sorry, guys.
You shouldn't joke at Rickie Lambert's expense, Wall. And this final question. In 2015, in what team of the decade did he appear?
Wait.
So it's the something team of the decade.
Oh, was it the
EFL
decade? Yeah.
I don't really understand how you can have a team of the decade when it's halfway through the decade.
2015. It's a little bit more prestigious than that.
Was it the player overall? Was it the player of the decade?
No, it was the Football Manager team of the decade.
The
one
Wonder
of the
Kid.
only awards he won, the Football Manager team of the decade.
You say this, well, don't you? I've got some facts for you, bro. Don't you worry.
Fantastic, I can't wait. So that's been the quiz. I think you both did pretty well, considering. I didn't know a couple of these. I definitely didn't know the Football Manager team of the decade one. But yeah, so that's well done, both of you. Let's move on to the next part. So, Wall, you said you've been doing some research, some stats. What have you got for me?
Well, I mean, I don't want to go just all in. I feel like we should probably start where he began.
Okay.
So obviously, as we know now, famously, he was released from Liverpool as a kid, teenager. But then he moved to Blackpool, I believe, played a few games, and then moved on to Rochdale, I want to say. Or is there somebody in between there? Does anybody want to assist me here?
I don't know what a clue, mate, although I have got a very interesting fact for you.
What, about this or about something else?
No, about Rickie.
Go on.
So, he briefly worked at a beetroot factory in 2001 before being signed by Macclesfield, taken from the very own Cardiff website.
Me and Rob have been on the same website there. I also scoured CardiffFC.com.
So his teams were Blackpool, Macclesfield Town, Stockport County, Rochdale, Bristol Rovers, Southampton, Liverpool, West Brom, Cardiff.
Nice. There we go. Yeah, sorry, I've skipped the first few teams because I realised he hadn't done much really until he moved to Rochdale. That's where he really hit some goal scoring form, from what I could tell.
Yeah. Yeah, 28 in 64 at Rochdale.
Yes, his first season. Sorry, Rob, go on.
What are we saying? If we start at League 2, 100 appearances, 36 goals. Decent record. Are we having it or are we not having it?
Well, at his age, I mean, you got to think, when he moved to Rochdale, he was 23, he was playing in League 2. And in the 05-06 season, he scored 22 in 46. That was his first real big season. I think for a 23-year-old. Yeah, 23-year-old, playing League 2,
yeah,
fair
it's not
enough.
a bad return.
For a striker, that's pretty good going.
Yeah, that's not a bad return at all, really, is it? I think we maybe move on to this too early. But his goals in general, what sort of goals did he score?
Well, I mean, I've only seen the Southampton ones, but judging from that, he had a good look. He had a very diverse selection of goals, from what I could tell.
See, I disagree.
He had a free kick on him.
Yeah, free kicks.
That's his diverse thing. Free kicks.
No.
Not top corners. Pretty rubbish ones, to be honest with you. He scored with them, so you got to give him credit. Because
half his Southampton ones were deflections.
When I watched that video of his Southampton goals, there was like a third of them were penalties, a third of them were free kicks, and a third of them were headers.
There were a few outside the box.
Mate. 34 penalties.
34 penalties, a lot. But to give him credit, his record of penalties was really good.
Oh, yeah, overall, yeah.
If you ever watch the videos of his goals for Southampton, the penalties, to be fair, we're talking pace, accuracy, top corner. We're talking really good pens.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I was a bit at first when I watched them. I was like, oh god, they're all just penalties and stuff, and they're all headers. But you look at the headers, and you look at them and how good they are, and the ability. Some of them were, really bullet headers. Top corner, bottom corner, etc. There were the old scrappy ones and stuff like that, but there were some really good headers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always saw him as a target man, but then seeing from, like I say, some of his free kicks. There was goals where he was outside the box. I mean, there weren't always great strikes, but you talk about a lot of big strikers these days, and you're on about how they're scoring goals inside the box, but he could do everything.
Yeah, he could, mate. Yeah. I put that down in my research. Strength, power, movement, headers. Obviously, he lacked the yard, but in terms of being able to hold off his man, find a bit of space. Then when you looked through it, really, for the amount Southampton paid for him, what was it? Just over $1 million, I think, around $1 million from Bristol. Yeah, you can't argue with that, can you? You cannot argue with, what was it for Southampton? Was it
106
over 100 goals? 117 goals for over $1 million across how many divisions was it? Well, it was League One, Championship, Premier League. You can't argue, can you? Cannot argue that return at all.
Not at all.
No, so let's talk about. I think we've moved through this quite quickly, but let's talk about what happened after Southampton. So, what happened at Liverpool? Because was it him just sticking his middle finger up because they released him? Not going to score for you. Can't be asked. Not doing it.
Well, I mean, I feel like it was a bit of a sympathy signing, if you can call it that. You got to think they've just sold Suarez.
Yeah.
At that point, they had Balotelli and Barini, and they had Rickie Lambert. I mean, come on. I mean, realistically, especially at that point, 2014, how old was he at that point?
Striker.
32, was he?
He was getting on. He was definitely past his peak, put it that way.
Yeah.
I think one thing you're dealing with at that point is the fact that Liverpool spent so much money. They'd recuperated how much from Suarez? What was it, around 75 million? Something around
like that.
And they obviously knew that they needed to strengthen. So they decided to go on that massive splurge, didn't they? And the problem being was that they spent a lot of that money on rubbish. And they had in themselves a terrible, terrible season, didn't they? So I think in terms of Lambert, we can't pin the blame on him for not performing. However, was it just simply a move maybe beyond him? Was it just simply a level above what he could achieve?
I mean, if you're talking about, let's say he had his Southampton, let's say he joined Southampton at 19 and then had his goal record for the years he was at Southampton and then moved to Liverpool. He's coming at Liverpool at a better time in his career. But like you say, he was I can't remember what age he was when he came to Liverpool, but like you say, well past where he should have been moving to a big club like that.
Oh, yeah, well past his peak.
Yeah, I mean, he moved to Liverpool in 2014, when he was 32 at the time. Again, it's you think for a 32-year-old to come to the biggest club of his career, like you say, Wall, I think there was something a bit more behind it than just the quality of him.
Yeah, I think obviously. Go on, Wall, mate.
No, I'm just agreeing with what Trey was saying. I mean, I think $4 million for a 32-year-old striker. I think they were sort of maybe running out of options.
Yeah,
they knew they could probably get someone like Rickie Lambert to come to the club. And proven from his seat, he had 15 goals in his first season in the Premiership and then 13 in his second. I mean, that's good, decent going for a mid-table team at the time.
I also think in terms of Liverpool, we've got to remember with the loss of Suarez, there's the added pressure on him going to Liverpool. Simply for the fact he has to perform here. How many goals did Suarez score the year before? Was it something around? Must have been 20 to 30 goals when they came so close to winning the league. So in reality, he's got to perform, hasn't he? They've got to find those goals from somewhere. But from my point of view, for Southampton, $4 million for a player who scored you 28 goals, double figures in 2 Premier League seasons.
Oh yeah.
Even if he is 32, is $4 million in reality? Is it a lot of money?
Yeah, it's not a lot of money at all. Really, we think. I mean, they only paid $1 million for it because they've made 4 times their return. But
and those add-ons. I'm not sure what the add-ons were, but in the excess of £4 million, for a player.
If it was money for every goal, well, they still didn't get much, did they?
Well, yeah, I don't know about that, but you mean you look at him when he was playing for Southampton in the Premiership. He scored against Manchester United, he scored against City, and he scored a winner against Chelsea. So he's not like he's turned up and just scored against the lower teams. He's scored scrappy goals to equalise in the last minute. He scored goals that have actually meant something.
Yes, mate, I find that as well. Last minute penalty in a 1-0 win over West Brom, opening day of season. Pressure, opening day, want to get off to a good start. Got to have some bottle to take that.
Yeah, that's the thing, I suppose, is that you pick on these little things like scoring goals at important moments. They may not have just been those 100 and whatever goals that he scored for Southampton. 20 of those could have been 3-point winning goals that they'd been drawing or whatever and stuff, and they'd got the extra 2 points. So the impact could have been a lot more than the stats say, couldn't they?
I think the one thing we have to look at when we look at Lambert is the fact that he's done it across all divisions, and he's done it League 2, done it League 1, he's done it Championship, and he's done it Premier League.
Well, that's one of the facts that I found, and I found it was so amazing that he's one of the handful of players to have scored in all 4 divisions in England.
But he's not just scored; he's done well, hasn't he?
Oh no, he's not. Yeah, he's done well, but he's not. What I'm saying is, we think about players like Robbie Earnshaw. He's obviously the famous one who scored in basically every competition going. And there's other players as well, but I didn't realise he'd done that. And I think that shows that. How can a player go from League 2, especially the age he was, 23? A lot of players at 23 are playing in the Prem.
Yeah.
And he's managed to go from there and get better. Get better with age. He didn't go into the Prem until he was in, was it 2012, which was, it'd have been, nearing on 30. And he's, and he's knocking in 15-goal seasons. It's amazing.
Good return. One final thing, obviously, of his playing career. Obviously, he's playing for England. Now, as we've already discussed, he obviously got his call up quite late to England, didn't he? I know when I mentioned this to you before, Wall, you said that we'll think of the other players that were playing at the time. So I had a little look at the other players that were playing for England's strike options in that time. And, I mean, Rooney, obviously, is an obvious one, but...
But then again, he was declining at that point, really. Yeah. Well, for his England career, anyway.
And there's people like Jermaine Defoe, obviously very, very good player. I think it was Sturridge was there, Welbeck was there. Does anyone know which fellow Southampton player was playing at the same time for England? Striker.
Like striker? I was going to say Lallana.
Jay Rodriguez.
It would have been Rodriguez.
It was Jay Rodriguez, yeah. He had 1 game for England, and I don't think much happened in it, but like I say, it was just, it's a strange time. I mean, I never would have thought Jay Rodriguez had a cap for England, but,
No, I can't even. I was shocked when I saw him playing for Southampton, to be honest with you. Can't even remember him playing for him.
That's how good he was.
How much of an impact he made there.
Well, no, he was playing well, wasn't he?
Career.
But unfortunately, he had the big injury, didn't he? That set him back like 2 years. And then after that, he's not really refound his form, did he? And then he moved to Burnley and it's picked up a little bit again, but nowhere near what people were expecting.
I found a clip on YouTube with Robbie Savage talking about, obviously we all know Lambert was taken to the 2014 World Cup, wasn't he?
Mm.
One that we won't go into much depth about.
Yeah,
but
played famously
Robbie
well.
Savage said that he would have rather have taken a fit Andy Carroll over Rickie Lambert. What are we saying there? Would anyone have back then have taken Andy Carroll? Who would you have taken, Andy Carroll or Rickie Lambert?
I mean, I think the problem with the 2014 World Cup squad anyway is that we didn't have the quality, and I think bringing the likes of Rickie Lambert and arguing whether we'd bring a fit Andy Carroll just highlights how poor the squad probably was at that point. I think Andy Carroll had a good couple of seasons in him, but again, like many players, injuries, and then he's not recovered and he's not come back.
As we've mentioned, playing Wayne Rooney, obviously, arguably the greatest striker England's ever had, obviously highest goal scorer. It's difficult for anyone to put up to that, especially because England have been so poor. I mean, arguably, you can't really talk about warm-up games and friendlies and stuff, but competition-wise, the most recent competition for us was the best competition we've had in years. So, it's difficult for anyone, I suppose, to follow up on what, Rooney did. But like I say, obviously never really got much of a chance, Lambert, for England, I suppose.
Well, no,
but I think, to be 31 and go on to achieve 11 caps, often when we think about Peter Crouch, he often said, it was a dream to have one cap. So, to reach that age, where people would say you're in the twilight of your career when you post 30, for him to go on and get 11 caps, 3 goals, it must have been a dream for him.
Yeah, I watched his first England goal, and it's just the elation on his face was incredible. He was absolutely loving it.
But I think that would be, wouldn't it, when you talk about, if you just said to 23, 24-year-old Rickie Lambert playing in League Two, you'll score with your first touch on your England debut in 8 or 9 years. What would he have said to you?
Well, they told you to F off.
Quite like the fact as well, one thing that shouldn't go amiss with him is, well, as with all that Southampton team of that era, is, the fact they did back-to-back promotions, didn't they? League One straight through to the Premier League. And when we think about, how difficult it is to get out of League One, you look at teams like Sunderland, you look at teams like Charlton who bounced back up, you look at teams like Sheffield United who got stuck down there for 7 years to then go up to the Championship, which is the most competitive league in the world and one of the hardest to get out of, teams chucking money around, hoping to reach, the promised land, to then relatively go up from League One with pretty much the same squad, score plenty of goals in that season and go straight up again. It's a feat that shouldn't go unnoticed because it is notoriously one of the toughest leagues to get out of.
Well, we've not mentioned it. He scored 27 in that season and he was Player of the Year. So
there you go.
Player of the Year overall? Or Southampton?
Yeah. So he won the PFA or the EFL Player of the Year for Championship that season. Obviously, he was in the
27
team
goals in 46 games. 27 in 46. Well, that's not including if he had any time out with injuries. It's it's a huge achievement. Teams are crying out now. You look at Ollie Watkins last year, 25 goals. I think it was somewhere like 23 to 25 goals for Brentford, and they'd made 25 million quid off him. So you think back then, what would a 27 goal Rickie Lambert be worth now?
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those things, isn't it? Like we've said a few times now, it's the timings, I suppose, for him. He did an incredible job for Southampton, and maybe if he'd done it a bit sooner, things would have been a bit different, I suppose, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, I think now you see players coming into form and fruition a lot older. I mean, Vardy's I think your standard example. Charlie Austin as well. I think they were both non-league players who then came suddenly into the big time.
Is Vardy one of those players that scored in every league?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, mate. He went from
non-league
to non-league to straight to League One or Championship, was it? I think it was. Yeah, I think it was League One to Championship, didn't he?
Because I knew he was on loan a couple of times, wasn't he? So I did wonder. So just to sort of wrap up before we make a decision, he retired. I've just been reading here. He suffered a really bad leg injury against Nottingham Forest. So
was this for West Brom or Cardiff?
This for Cardiff.
Typical of them, mate.
He obviously was out for a long term, and then he said that he didn't. He cancelled his contract in July of 2017 with the club, and then he hadn't found a club by October. So just decided to retire then, which at 36 years old, I suppose, is not unusual. But he clearly wasn't ready to retire. You speak of certain players. I mean, I know Peter Crouch said the only reason he retired is because he didn't want to be the player that they just lump on for 10 minutes at the end of the game.
Yeah, he didn't want to be the stick, did he?
Yeah, and he said that he could have done another year, but he just didn't want to.
You get players like that, don't you? Who say, I could have kept going, and the others were like, my knees are shot, I had to retire. I didn't have any choice.
Yeah.
I think it very much depends on your role as well. When you think, I know when we're talking fullback and fullbacks and midfielders and wingers, I think you reach that age where you do have to, because you think of fullback now, modern day fullback is expected to bomb forward and bomb back. Whereas when you think of a striker, your role is very much top third of the pitch.
Yeah, agreed. I suppose it's always changed, even in the few years, I suppose, since Rickie Lambert, first started in the Premier League, which is what we're talking 10 years ago-ish, roughly, whatever. Things have changed massively, haven't they? Different teams play different football, and the tactics and stuff. I mean, tactics have always been there, but it's a completely different game now, isn't it? Even in 10 years.
Oh yeah, I mean the way teams play now. I mean, you only have to look at City now. I mean, they don't play with a striker half the time.
False number 9, mate.
Exactly. They don't. The game's so different.
Well, I suppose that begs the question. Then if we're saying Rickie Lambert, we're saying ideally he is. Not only is he is an ideal target man. Obviously, he can do the other things that we've seen. You've seen the way he sometimes moves with the ball, and he would have that yard to get by a player. But is he a player now then who would fit in the Premier League, or have we seen sort of the end of the target man?
Oof, I mean,
I wouldn't say the end of it.
No, I mean you got to think teams like Burnley. They definitely still play with the target man. Chris Wood. I mean, Ashley Barnes can probably do that sort of job as well. They're very much built around having a forward who can hold the ball, bring it down, bring others into play. And I think, I mean, you even look at other teams, Manchester United, Cavani. That's the best way that they seem to play at the moment.
Yeah.
A man up front who can do other things bar hold the ball up, but then it's still required a lot of the time.
Yeah, agreed. So we're coming to the end of, I suppose, the Rickie Lambert discussion of his career. I'm sure I've sent you both that I've got a little ranking system for us to use. I just want to know both where you both place him, basically.
Well, should we go through it? Because I can't remember it.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah. So obviously, as you know, the podcast is The Streets Never Forget. The top ranking, so the top, we're putting him right at the top, would be The Streets Should Never Forget. So you should never forget him. He's fantastic. His job, he should be brought up in conversations of really good players that are underrated. We've got just below that.
I think Southampton fans will be pretty angry. I think we all know where they place him.
Yeah, all the Southampton fans that are going to be listening to this, most definitely.
The next ranking is The Streets Should Remember Him. So he's you should probably remember him for the good job he did. He wasn't really really good, but he wasn't too bad, and he's all right. The middle option is The Streets Can Do What They Like. So not bothered either way. Didn't really stand out to you. Yeah, he was okay, but nothing ever special. The next ranking is The Streets Should Probably Forget Him. So obviously that's he's really not as good as maybe he was made out to be. And then the final bottom ranking is The Streets Should Definitely Forget. So a player you think was terrible, really rubbish, and it was way bigger than he was supposed to be. He never was actually that good. They're the 5 little rankings we've got. Where would we both place him?
Go on, Rob. I'll let you go first.
It's tricky, mate, because I think that
I mean, I've got my answer.
There's no way we can say a bloke who's scored in every league. He's scored 99 goals in League One, 31 goals in the Premier League, 31 goals in the Championship, and 36 goals in League Two. We can't sit there and say he hasn't had. Obviously, you can't trophy-wise. You can't turn around and say, yeah, he's won the big trophies and has had that career. But at the same time, in no way would you look upon his career and say, that's a bad one. He's had a bad one there. His Bristol Rovers' second highest ever goal scorer and is a hero there. Southampton obviously is an absolute club legend. I assume they worship the ground he walks on. So for me, he's going to be one of those who he didn't totally stand out, but we're still certainly we're not gonna. He's not one of those who you should just dismiss. So I think rank 2. I think
the streets should remember him.
I think the streets. I think if you go down to Southampton now and times were normal and they were Southampton plans playing football, I think you'd often hear a Lambert,
Rickie, Rodriguez. So you're putting him. Street should remember him. War, where are you putting him?
Yeah, completely agree. The street should remember rank 2. I think a couple of things I forgot to even mention. The fact he was the top scorer in all 4 leagues 2 seasons running. You know,
wow, that's good.
He's won the Golden Boot in three times for obviously different leagues. You know, I think in terms of goal scorers,
he's right up there, isn't he?
Yeah,
I think in terms of rank 1, I think there's got to be, if you're going to be rank 1, I think you've got to be a player similar to Lambert. You've got to have a quality career behind you, but I think you've also got to have an iconic moment.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of that, there isn't an iconic moment. When you think of if you were talking, for example, Crouchy, you'd look at his goal against Man City, wouldn't you? You'd look at a couple of his overhead kicks, and those are iconic moments. But I think for me, Rickie Lambert, don't get me wrong, cracking goal scorer. He seemed to be able to do everything. He seemed to be able to, he'd hit the odd free kick. He never missed a penalty for Southampton. It's an absolute cracking record. He'd head the ball, he'd hold the ball up. So you can never take away from the fact he's had a quality career, but you are never going to get an iconic moment associated with him, and I think that's what keeps him out the top rank.
I mean,
what about you, Trail? What's your opinion?
Totally agree with both of you. I must admit, when I first thought about when we first got this name, I didn't think that much of him. I thought, he's okay. He's all right. He's an all right player. Yes, he scored goals for Southampton, but I didn't really rate him that much. Obviously, it's overshadowed by what you learn of him at Liverpool, and there's obviously that famous meme of him, Balotelli and Barini, isn't there?
Yes, the stats.
Whenever Liverpool do badly, it's who's playing for them? Is it Salah, Mane, Firmino, or is it Barini, Balotelli, Lambert? I was overshadowed by that. But some of the stats we spoke of here, the golden boots, the quality of the headers that he scored, and the penalties and the penalty record and stuff like that. I think the street should definitely remember him.
Oh yeah,
I mean that's tricky, isn't it, mate? I think that when you think back to that Liverpool team, like we've already mentioned, they spent a lot of money on pretty average players, and I think that's sort of his last career stint, because obviously his next spells at West Brom and Cardiff didn't really go too well. You're often left with that association of the player. You're often left with that final sort of image, that final lasting legacy. Whereas for him, we've got to remember what preceded it, and we've also got to remember what he was playing with at Liverpool. He was playing with, a Steven Gerrard who was past the peak of his powers, and he was playing with a Liverpool team who just weren't at it, who clearly were hungover from the year before.
Well, we've come to our decision there. Thank you very much for joining me both.
What about next week, mate? Because I have a cracking name for you.
Yeah, well, I've had a few names milling around the old head as well. I thought
we make
in the old noggin, mate. You see, I'm thinking the absolute quality player.
No, don't give it away.
Let me just throw this name out there, mate. Let me throw it.
You're too eager, Rob. We've not even finished Rickie Lambert's podcast, and you are eager to go into the next name.
The disrespect show to Rickie Lambert right now.
We've just said
the viewers are going to want to know, mate. The viewers are going to want to know.
Well, they'll have to wait.
Well, they're going to view. It's podcast.
The listeners, mate, are going to want to know.
We've got to keep them waiting. Messages in the private chat, Rob.
Cliffhanger. They're going to come back for more.
Who's that? Who did he play for?
Cliffhanger.
Played for Tension FC, mate.
Right, so thank you very much for joining me, Rob.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure. Wall, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. And this is the Streets Will Never Forget podcast. The Rickie Lambert episode officially finished.
Legend.